Genesis chapter 48, we can just narrow it down to Israel's deathbed. Genesis chapter 48 and 49 actually concludes into that. But it's also Israel blessing the firstborn in Genesis chapter 48. It is the birthright blessing that is going on in this chapter. So Israel is become sick, and so they're let Joseph know. So Joseph meets with Israel, and he brings his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Remember, Manasseh is the firstborn, and Ephraim is the secondborn. So Israel begins to speak to Joseph about his journey, um, especially being blessed by the visitation of the ladder that came down, the angels ascending and descending, and Jehovah is at the top, pronouncing the blessing over him to be fruitful and multiply, that he will bless him for the land. The same blessing that he spoke to Abraham, the same blessing spoken to Isaac, and it is now spoken to Israel. So during this conversation, Israel, first of all, is very excited that he had the opportunity to spend time with Joseph, because remember, he thought Joseph was deceased. And not only did he see Joseph, he actually had an opportunity to engage with his grandchildren by Joseph. So Israel actually adopts the two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. So he adopts them and bring them up to sonship as equal to his 12 sons. So these two sons, Manasseh the firstborn and Ephraim the secondborn. You like, why she keeps saying the first and secondborn? Because what we find in Genesis chapter 48, that Israel switches that, changes Ephraim to the firstborn and Manasseh to the secondborn. So Ephraim, because Ephraim's promise is that he will be a multitude of nations. He will be more than just Ephraim, and that's nations with S. Remember, Israel is one nation. So Ephraim will have multiple nations coming from him, and then Manasseh will be multiplied, but he will not have those multiple nations. So my insight from Genesis chapter 48, and I think this goes all the way to Abraham, to be honest, because I notice each time the birthright is passed on is at the deathbed or close to the deathbed of the father. This happened with Abraham, and this happened with um, Isaac, and now this is happening with Israel. So one thing to remember is that Abraham had 8 sons, and before he passed on, out of those 8 sons, Isaac is the one that got the firstborn blessing, the birthright, not Ishmael or none of the other 6 sons that came from Keturah. So as we get into understanding for Genesis chapter 49, we're going to see what's going on with the sons themselves. So in my worksheet, I have all the cross reference that we have talked about in Genesis chapter 48. No questions and no word study for Genesis chapter 48.